Okay, so he was an Afghani that was in Afghanistan. He was 15 years old when he was recruited by the CIA, who were running special operations in Afghanistan under Obama. And this kid was on a death squad, okay, where they assassinated people, okay? And so, you know, keep this in mind. He came to America because he was on the death squads in the CIA. Okay, they assassinated a military, high-ranking military official. We're watching this.
Now you want to go against every single immigrant. That doesn't make sense. And it's frankly not who we are, because if that's the case, let's talk about the white supremacists and how many of them need to be kicked out of this country, because I can guarantee you, I can track down more crimes that they've committed, because overall immigrants have a lower crime committal rate than white supremacists.
So over the weekend, one of the most annoying people in the entire Congress, Representative Jasmine Crockett out of the state of Texas, appeared on an MS Now show. And for those of you who are a bit confused on what MS Now is, it is essentially the rebrand of MSNBC, which is currently on the cusp of being bought and stripped down and sold off by private equity due to the fact that it is an absolutely terrible news organization. And during the course of this interview, which was meant to pump her up for a potential Senate run in 2026, Jasmine Crockett told lie after lie after lie, including the clip that I opened with. However, she was allowed to get away with it throughout the whole course of the segment, at least until one person on this MS Now panel decided to ask her about her lies related to Lee Zeldin allegedly taking money from Jeffrey Epstein, which, by the way, proved to be ridiculously stupid in every possible way. As Jasmine Crockett has been told now and time again, the Dr. Jeffrey Epstein that donated to Lee Zeldin and other Republicans is not the same person who is the criminal that would actually be a problem if he was giving money to you. But of course, Jasmine Crockett has no brain cells at all whatsoever, so what we're going to do throughout the course of this video is break down all her lies, break down how she can't even stand up to the fake level of scrutiny that was given to her on MS Now. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who donates to this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money, okay?
So for those of you who are a bit confused on why Jasmine Crockett is talking about white supremacy and evil white racists to begin with, the answer should be extraordinarily obvious if you guys have paid attention to how American and Western politics actually work. So of course, just prior to Thanksgiving, an Afghan refugee who was admitted into this country under the Biden administration, post the withdrawal and the fall of the nation of Afghanistan, decided to drive all the way from Washington State to the District of Columbia and shoot 2 National Guardsmen and killed one of them, by the way.
Dang, that he drove that far? That's probably damn near 4,000 miles. That's crazy. He drove all that way just to shoot 2 random people? Oh god, man. What in the goddamn? So I actually was talking about this yesterday. We're gonna get into what was actually going on with this person, what I know about the situation. Of course, it only happened a few days ago. But yeah, there's a lot to look at with it. But I really want to see what Actual Justice Warrior has to say about this situation. I wonder.
Way due to the fact that he was upset about grievances he had against the United States of America, due to the fact that the United States of America treated him extraordinarily well while he was here. Now, of course, there are a lot of people talking about how this person had a renewal in terms of his asylum claim back in April, which would be under the Trump administration. However, a lot of the scrutiny has been put on the Biden administration, and rightfully so, due to the fact that people were questioning this vetting process way back when, and this guy was renewed over and over again under that previous administration, and one oversight under the Trump administration does not compare to the multiple oversights under the administration that Joe Biden was running. But let us get into that particular case just a little bit, just so you can understand what happened, so you can get what we're talking about when we don't want certain people in the United States of America. So the suspect is 29-year-old Rama Nakala Lakanwal, and I think I'm pronouncing that wrong, but I don't give a damn. And apparently the reason why he was so angry at the United States of America is due to the fact that he had financial burdens, including not being employed, having an expired work permit, and allegedly struggling to pay rent and feed his starving children. Now look, this is an ABC article that's talking about how he was trying to feed his kids, but in reality, he went to murder people who serve our country in the National Guard in what, if it would have happened in Afghanistan, would have been called a blue on green attack. So spare me the sad tale about his 5 children that we admitted into the United States of America on refugee status, and then allowed this guy to get a work permit, and then of course allowed him to live off of our welfare system, as he was definitely getting subsidized by the taxpayer in order to cover the cost of raising his children in this nation, even though he did not appreciate that and he didn't even bother to work in this nation. So of course he shoots 2 National Guardsmen. They eventually stop him, take him into custody, and one of those National Guardsmen dies. Trump has promised retribution, and this all lays the framework for Jasmine Crockett not to talk about Islamic extremism, not to talk about the vetting process for refugees from terrorists.
I don't know if I would use the word stop. He said they stopped him. Bro, he murdered 2 people. I don't think they really stopped him. Okay, they got him after he did it. Okay, after he murdered 2 people. The reason that I get caught up in these details or like these words. Okay, people will say like I'm doing semantics. It's all about policing. Okay. You see, conservatives, they see police as protectors of the community, okay? Right-wing people, even liberals, actually, what the fuck am I talking about? Like, even Democrats and liberals, they see police as good, mostly. You know, it's just a few bad apples, you know, we gotta take care of it. It's a few bad apples. Okay. And yes, rad libs do defund the police, they do say that, okay, that's... But anyway, I'm talking about like liberals by and large. Okay, so when we use words like they stopped, that makes it sound like the police actually did something. Okay, they stopped a crime. Okay, they didn't stop a crime. The guy murdered those 2 people, and they didn't stop it. Okay, because they couldn't stop it because the police are not equipped to deal with these things. Okay, these shootings, which are killing normal Americans every day. Okay, and like I do not condone violence. I will never condone violence against anyone. Okay, including National Guardsmen, including military people, including police and including ICE. Okay, as evil as ICE is, and as much as I dislike the police and the military, I don't condone this kind of violence, but like this is something that happens to regular Americans every single day. But when it happens to 2 National Guards in Washington D.C., it's national news for a week. You know, what did this happen, like 4 days ago? People are still talking about it. And they're gonna keep talking about it. But like on the day Charlie Kirk got shot, how long did people talk about the school shooting that happened that day? The answer is like none, like not at all. Okay, nobody fucking talked about it. Hardly anyone. And that's just the way it is, you know. If you're publicly conservative, if you're a police officer, if you're military personnel, then these things matter to you. You know, if you get killed, it matters. But if you're a normal person and you get killed, nobody fucking cares. And it's just crazy to me. But anyway, there's still a lot of details that he hasn't mentioned yet about this case, and I have a feeling he's probably not going to mention it, so we're going to get into all of that just as soon as I feel like it.
Some hotbeds, but of course to talk about evil white supremacists.
This can't be America. But obviously in Trump's America, this is exactly what he wants. And the idea that one person can get out of line and commit such a horrific crime as shooting 2 of our National Guardsmen, 2 National Guardsmen that never ever asked to be here. In fact, we know the young lady that lost her life specifically, we're saying that this is a waste of time, but now you want to go against every single immigrant. That doesn't make sense. And it's frankly not who we are, because if that's the case, let's talk about the white supremacists and how many of them need to be kicked out of this country, because I can guarantee you, I can track down more crimes that they've committed, because overall immigrants have a lower crime committal rate than white supremacists.
So this is nonsense for a number of reasons. First and foremost, there are just not that many extremist attacks in the United States of America compared to overall crimes, so it would be ridiculous to say that white supremacists or any terror group actually outperforms an entire demographic in terms of criminality. And of course, the implication in Crockett's statement is somehow we're going soft on these evil white racists when they commit crimes, when in reality...
It depends. It depends. Year over year, it depends on how you measure it. Okay, like what is white supremacist violence, right? What is it? So like the only study that I think is somewhat reliable on this is one I've mentioned before, the CSIS. Their study on this over the course of almost, I think a little over 30 years. Okay. They've been documenting political violence in America. And when we're talking about violence in that study, they mean like literal acts of violence. They mean like kinetic, a kinetic altercation, right? And right-wing people do a lot of that. Okay, Nazis do a lot of that shit. I've talked about it on stream before. 87% of this documented political violence comes from right-wing people. Okay, it does. That's just that's a fact. If you want to look into the study, you want to try and poke holes in it, you can. No study is perfect, and I'm sure that one is no exception. But I think you can see what's really going on here. Okay, right-wing extremists are incredibly violent, and I think that given the population size, they commit crimes at a far higher rate than immigrants, which is probably what this person was talking about. Okay, of course, there are millions of immigrants in America. We are, as they used to say, a nation of immigrants. Okay, so there are a lot of immigrants here, and many of them, just like the regular population, okay, the citizen population, many of them are criminals. Okay, it happens. People be committing crimes. But anyway, to argue that immigrants commit more crimes on average than white supremacists, than Nazis, is just insane and delusional. What the fuck are you talking about, man? Also, Nazis do evil shit that is legal, that is not a crime, like marching in the street, waving their swastika flag. Okay, like that's going on in this country right now. Okay, people are doing that. And anyway, that's freedom of speech. That's not a crime. I'm not saying it should be a crime. I'm just saying that it's fucking evil, and fucking immigrants don't do that shit. So I don't know. But anyway, obviously the population of white supremacists is lower than the the demographic that is immigrants in the United States. And it's just like a nothing argument. Like, it's not, this person, actual justice warrior, is just intentionally misinterpreting this person's words in the least charitable way possible. And that's basically just the same thing as straw manning. Okay, he's building a straw man and tearing it down. And it's stupid. It's stupid and reductive and pointless. Okay, you're a fucking moron.
These people face the most severe
Eric,
consequences. And again,
whatever
people will
the fuck
often
your
point to
name
this
is.
chart from Cato that talks about deaths from extremism, and they'll say, look, right-wing extremism, which often gets subsidized.
Yes, this is real. Okay, now, there has been a surge in political violence recently. And some people say it's left-wing, some people say it's right-wing, whatever. I say it's a little too early to tell this year, right? A lot of these cases are fresh, and there's very little evidence to go along with them. But anyway. What the hell? I would like to see what he has to say about
Instituted for
this.
white supremacists.
By the way, this isn't the study that I was talking about. This is something else. Okay, but anyway, it says the same thing. Of course. Fucking course. So this one goes back even further. Wow, 1975. By the Cato Institute. I can't remember if I looked into this one. I feel like I looked into most of them. But I don't know.
Extremism
Anyway.
makes up the majority according to this chart, even though this chart excludes September 11th, but doesn't exclude Oklahoma City, even though a huge portion of the deaths in this chart are from Oklahoma City, and that's one instance. However, 9/11 gets excluded because that one instance would skew the numbers. In addition to that, white people represent about 63% of today's America, and the extremism on this particular chart.
Yeah, and also, like...
Walcott1L said hello there, nice stream.
Hello, Wallcat1L. Anyway, not only would 9/11 skew these results, but it really just doesn't make any fucking sense to include these.
Walcott1L said you're doing well, I just followed you, keep it up.
Thank you. Thank you, Wallcat. Or, I mean, Walcott.
Walcott1L said I will like to catch your next stream, could you add me on Discord? My username is Walcott_126.
Yeah, man, I'll add you later. I'm in the middle of doing this, but hey, you can always join the official J-Star broadcast Discord server.
Walcott1L said Walcott_126.
I got it. Yeah, I got your username. I got it, bro. Thank you. Thank you. I will add you, okay, but I'll add you later. You can join the Discord server right now, though. It's in the description. It's below the stream. You got it. Alright, what were we talking about? Oh, yeah, you know, 9/11 has a lot of conspiracy theories surrounding it, who knew about it, who facilitated it. Like, I think at this point it's safe to say that there were expectations, there were like somebody knew. Okay, somebody knew. And it wasn't any like Muslim majority nation's government. It wasn't. Okay, it was either Israel or America. Okay, the FBI, the CIA, our intelligence community probably had evidence that this was happening, and they didn't act on it. Or maybe they did and they didn't make it public. I don't know. But it's just like, you know, there was a vested interest in allowing this attack to happen. Okay, that interest being going to war with Iraq. But yeah, I mean, who knows? Who knows, man? I think it's just like it's too weird. The whole situation is too weird to include here. Okay. We're talking about when we're talking about the 9/11 hijackers, we're talking about extremists, right? Right, Muslim extremists that hung out with strippers and went to strip clubs and would like drink heavily, and like there's so much weird shit that came out about these guys, it makes no fucking sense. Like, that is not... I understand that there are Islamic fundamentalists, a majority of Islamic fundamentalists in Al-Qaeda, okay, in ISIS as well, in various other, you know, like terrorist organizations that we know of here in America, right? But like, those guys don't sound like fundamentalists. Okay, so like there are a lot of weird inconsistencies with this whole situation. And anyway, either way, I think that even if you were to assume that 9/11 was done by actual, real Islamic fundamentalists, it's like it skews the numbers so much. It's basically an outlier in as far as like statistical analysis. Like, this is just not a regular or frequent occurrence. Major terror attacks like this. And why is that? Well, supposedly it's because of our impeccable intelligentsia. Okay, but somehow they allowed 9/11 to happen. Okay, it's weird. Anyway, we're gonna keep going. I was
from
only
the right
6
is
months
about
old when it
equivalent
happened.
per capita
So,
to
what
the
do I know?
population of white people in the United States of America. Now, of course, back when the chart started, back in 1975, the white population was over 90% of the population in this country, so right-wing extremism is actually underrepresented. But even if we take the most generous view of this Cato study, what we ultimately end up finding in extremism is actually underrepresented. The white population was over 90% of the population in this country, so right-wing extremism started back in 1975. The white population was over 90% of the population.
Hold on, this doesn't... I'm not following. Wait, so white people were 90% of the population, which is bullshit, by the way. I call bullshit. Okay. Because, like, it depends on what you mean by white. Okay, you mean people that identify as white? Do you mean people of European ancestry? Because they ain't all white. Okay. Like, fuck, I wouldn't even... Like, look at me. I wouldn't even be considered white 100 years ago. Okay, and, like, they... Like, what I'm saying is the parameters which made you a white person were even stricter in 1975. So, like, how are there all these white people? That don't make no fucking sense. Anyway.
Even though a huge portion of the deaths in this chart are from Oklahoma City, and that's one instance. However, 9/11 gets excluded because that one instance would skew the numbers. In addition to that, white people represent about 63% of today's America, and the extremism on this particular chart from the right is about equivalent per capita to the population of white people in the United States of America. Now, of course, back when the chart started, back in 1975, the white population was over 90% of the population in this country, so right-wing extremism is actually underrepresented. But even if we take the most generous view of this Cato study, what we ultimately end up finding, and I talked about this in a previous video on this channel, is that Muslims, who represent 1% of the population.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around what the fuck he's trying to communicate here. White people, 90, like, what is the correlation between right-wing extremism and white people and, like, population size? Or I should say population ratio. I guess he's saying that, like, white people are the white supremacists, right? Which isn't always true, and increasingly is becoming less true. But, like, I don't know, man. I want to figure out what he's saying so I can deconstruct it. I can't, like... I'm getting brain blasted right now.
Actually
I don't even
represent a huge portion of the extremist attacks, 24 times about their population in terms of terrorist attacks. So yes, per capita, they are a significantly higher threat. But Jasmine Crockett, not even smart enough to make this claim, this statistical manipulation that we see commonly, she decided to go with immigrants commit less crimes than white supremacists, which is just absurd because there are millions of immigrants. They have committed hundreds of thousands of crimes each and every year, and the idea that in raw numbers they would be less than white supremacist extremists is absurd and insane and ridiculous. In addition to that,
but did she mean raw numbers? But did she mean raw numbers? See, in the I like it how he says, like, oh, in the most charitable way possible, when he's literally never charitable with any of his political opponents. Like, me personally, I can be uncharitable sometimes. I don't mean to. I really try my best to understand people, to see where they're coming from when I'm, you know, debating or conversating or just talking. But, like, this guy just consistently is always assuming the worst in others. It's crazy.
As I pointed out time and time again, almost no state, almost no municipality in this
she
nation
meant
records
raw numbers.
immigration status when they're actually arresting people. And in addition to that, we also measure crimes via the National Crime Victimization Survey, which asks victims if they have been the victims of crimes. And you know what? While this is great for determining the racial makeup and the gender makeup of the criminals, because if you get attacked by a black guy and we ask you who attacked you, and you say a black male, that's easy for us to be able to actually document. But again, the victimization surveys are basically useless in terms of capturing immigration status data, because while you might know the look of the person who committed a crime against you, the fact is you likely don't know their immigration status just from looking at them, and that's not even a question on the National Crime Victimization Survey. So an arrest, which is one of our worst ways...
Of course not. Because you can't. What? He said most likely you can't. Like, no, man, you can't at all. You can't look at somebody and know, unless he's saying, like, if they're brown, which is probably what he means, you can guess if they're an illegal. Yeah, if you're brown, there's like a 15% chance you're illegal. Yeah. So fucking stupid.
To measure
dude.
criminality, because not every crime results in an arrest. People are not tracking the data of immigration status. But then when we have reports, the reports don't include immigration status because that requires delving into the documentation of the suspect, who again is not necessarily in custody. But then our even better measure of criminality, which is the victimization survey, has absolutely no ability to tell us anything about that. And yet these people come out and lie time and time again about how the data shows us consistently that immigrants are not committing all that many crimes. And again, that lumps in legal and illegal immigrants, which would have different crime rates. So yeah, this is nonsense in every possible way. But again, it's a distraction because somebody of a Muslim background committed a crime. So obviously we have to go to the Norm Macdonald clip.
I can't say my friend's name, but he said his biggest fear is that ISIS or some terrorist group like that will get a hold of a dirty bomb and explode it over a major city within the United States and kill tens of millions of people. Because then the blowback against innocent Muslims would be absolutely terrible. Yes.
Which, while hilarious, is definitely not a joke, because constantly what we see from these people in the left wing is that they're more upset about the backlash against the community of which the criminal originated from than the crime that was actually committed, which is shameful in every possible way. Also, I want to point out that Jasmine Crockett's talking about how the National Guard shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Two National Guardsmen that never ever asked to be here. In fact, we know the young lady that lost her life specifically. We're saying that this is a waste of time.
Which again is another tactic in order to deflect responsibility away from the criminal and put it on the evil orange man, which is ridiculous, because the idea that, oh, well, if you deploy the military at some place, at some location, and something bad happens to them, it's not the fault of the criminal that pulled the trigger because he had some, I guess, medical condition that requires him to shoot at guardsmen, drive across the country in order to do so. It's the fault of who deployed them, is insane and asinine. Again, if you want to assign some responsibility for their deployment, for them actually being there, then you are free to do that. I think that is fair enough. But the idea that we completely deflect from the process that allowed this person into the country and from the person's own criminal actions is insane.
What was that process exactly? What was that process of this person entering the country? How'd that happen? We will
and
find
ridiculous.
out.
You have to assign faults at a reasonable scale, but of course the Democrats have that fault completely backwards because they don't want to talk about immigration, they don't want to talk about Islam, and they don't want to talk about criminals that are motivated by problems within themselves. They'd rather project the actions of that individual onto society more broadly.
Congressman, it wouldn't be a conversation with us if I didn't quickly put you on the spot on something. You made a little bit of news last week when you mistakenly accused Lee Zeldin, another Republican,
I didn't say
accepting money from Jeffrey Epstein, but it was a different Jeffrey Epstein according to the financial records. Do you want to give the opportunity to amend that? And
I have no amendments.
So you have this MS Now person that is basically asking this question in the softest way humanly possible, even though it was obvious what Jasmine Crockett was doing. She looked through the financial records of Republicans, ended up finding somebody named Jeffrey Epstein that donated to Lee Zeldin. By the way, this was after the criminal Jeffrey Epstein died in prison, so again, it could not have possibly been him. And then she went onto the House floor in order to say, look, they're receiving donations from some guy named Jeffrey Epstein, and yeah, they're really terrible because they took money from the guy named Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah, that's who they took money from, and she was called out on this immediately, and she has an incoherent, stupid explanation for this, when in reality, the explanation couldn't be any more obvious. A representative from the U.S. Virgin Islands was receiving text messages directly from Epstein during a congressional hearing where he was feeding her questions and information. She obviously had a close relationship with him. By the way, this representative is a delegate from the...
I don't know about that. I don't know about all that now. She obviously has a close relationship with him. I mean, I don't know, man. They were texting. She was like trying to use him or something. Look, all of these politicians are like in bed with Jeffrey Epstein. Of course they are. I'm not going to say that she definitely wasn't friends with Jeffrey Epstein. I'm just saying she probably wasn't the most close to him. Okay? That's it.
The Virgin Islands, who's a member of the Democratic Party and a black woman. So Jasmine Crockett was trying to deflect from that in order to basically cover up for her association with the real Jeffrey Epstein by throwing out this fake nonsense. But look at the way that Jasmine struggles to respond to this.
When I was on the floor, for those that don't know how it works, basically they decided to bring this privilege motion up, and they decided that they wanted to kick Stacey off of her committees because Stacey had received Stacey Plaskett because she had received a donation from Jeffrey Epstein.
So Jasmine starts talking about how speaking on the House floor works and how a bill works or whatever, which again is a deflection from reality. And then of course she talks about how this Stacey Plaskett, who's a representative from the Virgin Islands, received a donation from Jeffrey Epstein. However, that wasn't what was at issue. It was her taking directions from him live during a congressional hearing that people had a problem with. He had her personal phone number and was texting her, telling her what to ask, and then she was doing that. So of course we have a lie right here, and Jasmine is going to go on to give the same dumb explanation that we've heard her give related to her messing this up on purpose, by the way, in order to lie, in order to deflect from the reality that her girl was actually associated with Epstein while trying to deflect that on Republicans.
I had maybe 20 minutes. We researched the FEC, and because I like to speak with specificity, that's kind of what comes with being an attorney. I made clear that there was a Jeffrey Epstein. They knew on the other side that I did not have time to actually pull up and actually research, especially since that particular one that Lee Zeldin got up in her uproar about was specifically out of the New York area. We know that he was out of that area. So, and this obviously was not done post Jeffrey Epstein's life. So I made sure that I said a Jeffrey Epstein.
So yeah, the donation did come through after Jeffrey Epstein died. So Jasmine Crockett's lying right there. And then she's like, oh, well, we found somebody out of the New York area. So we knew that. We had the information right there. Even though, again, wasn't Jeffrey Epstein based out of Florida? That's where he was indicted and actually convicted and given that ridiculously light sentence. So Crockett has no actual explanation for this. And again, even the MS Now host is getting frustrated with her stupidity.
You were trying to insinuate that it was the
I absolutely was insinuating that it could be possible. That is true. But the point is, I never said that it was that specific one because I did not have the adequate time to do it. And so the Jeffrey Epstein has stepped forward. And that's not like, you know, a normal name. And I think that what would have been problematic is if I would have claimed that, say, that happened and it legitimately never happened. So ultimately, he cleared the record. I have not researched further. I've not talked to this doctor.
You can agree.
So she said she had no time to look this up, only 20 minutes to look it up, even though, again, you could actually see the information on the FEC filings that Jasmine Crockett is referring to. You could see the donations that came through after the death of Jeffrey Epstein. She also says it's an uncommon name. She also is like kind of blaming the guy, Dr. Jeffrey Epstein, who is very unfortunate to share a name with the criminal for, I guess, sharing the name with him. She's like, that's a very uncommon name. Again, Jeffrey is not uncommon at all. Epstein, I'm sure it's more common among Jewish communities. Sounds like a Jewish name to me. I don't understand why she's like, oh, that's very uncommon, blah, blah, blah. I mean, the woman is an absolute idiot in every possible way, and this is embarrassing. And again, she's like, it would have been problematic if I said it was the Jeffrey Epstein. But by the way, the real one came out, said he was not that guy, and I have not researched into that any further. I know I said the 20-minute time scale was exactly why I couldn't do the research, but now, weeks later, I just haven't researched into it, trying to imply that the doctor is still Jeffrey Epstein right here.
But you can agree that Lee Zeldin didn't receive money.
I can agree that Lee
Jeffrey
Zeldin
Epstein
has said that he's not received money from the Jeffrey Epstein. Absolutely.
I mean, this is such a ridiculous lie. They basically have to lead her around like an idiot because she can't actually answer the question in any legitimate way. And by the way, it shows that none of these Democrats actually care about Jeffrey Epstein, the real one, the crimes that he committed, and they're only using this right now for political reasons. Remember, they never talked about releasing the files under the Biden administration. All of a sudden, they couldn't be bothered to talk about that. They only cared about it once Trump started signaling that he didn't care about it so that they could use it against him.
The Democrats
right
don't
here,
want
they're
to do
trying
it. They don't want
weaponize
to do it.
lie about this, not only to attack their political opponents, which is standard, it's politics, everything politicians do is in fact political, but to cover up an actual association and a politician that was taking directions from Jeffrey Epstein. Again, insane, madness in every possible way, and Jasmine Crockett looks like an idiot on this MSNBC interview, and it was so bad that guess what? On the MS Now YouTube channel, they cut this portion from this 12-minute video. This was just removed because you can't actually sell her as a serious Senate candidate when she is showing you how unserious she actually is. But of course, those are just my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. As per usual,
I still think you're stupid, man. That's what I think. But yeah, anyway, I thought he was going to talk more about the Afghani CIA operative, right? But he didn't, unsurprisingly. Instead, he, you know, was like finger wagging Jasmine Crockett for, like, you know, talking shit about a guy named Jeffrey Epstein, okay, a random guy. Which, you know, it is, I don't know how common of a name it is. I ain't never heard of anybody named Epstein other than, you know, the big dog. Rest in peace. But anyway, all that is to say, right? Let's talk about the CIA operative. Okay, so he was an Afghani that was in Afghanistan. He was 15 years old when he was recruited by the CIA, who were running special operations in Afghanistan under Obama. And this kid was on a death squad, okay, where they assassinated people, okay, and so, you know, keep this in mind. He came to America because he was on the death squads in the CIA. Okay, they assassinated like, you know, military, high-ranking military officials in Afghanistan. So he did that. He got PTSD from that, probably. He got lots of mental illness, and then he came to America because he was in the CIA, and I guess he brought his kids with him. He had children, brought them with him. But anyway, for some strange reason, this person with all of this emotional baggage snapped the other day and murdered 2 random people who were just doing their jobs in D.C. So anyway, it's so fucking disgusting to me that they'll hit the he was an immigrant button and just like not even talk about his his CIA affiliation.